Thank you, Simon. I've put together a talk. So just to warn you now, I've written just about every word of it. So this is going to be more of a speech than a talk. Apologies for that. I'm better when I'm free-forming, but there's a lot of important ideas I want to make sure I covered here. So, as Simon said, as you may know, I've spoken here on the topic before of the road to liberty needs a strategy, and there's an article up on my blog about that. And as Simon mentioned, it was slightly briefer than I wanted. So this evening I'd like to elaborate on this topic with some subsequent thoughts. So we all accept, well I hope everyone here anyway, accepts that we want to reduce or remove the state. So how do we get to that libertarian nirvana, or at least closer to it? There's no simple answer. Murray Rothbard said, only liberty can achieve man's prosperity, fulfilment and happiness. In short, libertarianism will win because it's true, because it is the correct policy for mankind and truth will eventually out. While I also agree with the sentiment, I don't think it's as easy or as inevitable as Rothbard imagined. I don't believe that we can currently win against the state and its supporters solely by political means, which I mentioned before. The state has too powerful an incentive to relinquish its existence, and the people are as yet unconvinced of its inherently violent nature. As Machiavelli said, it must be remembered that there is nothing more difficult to plan, more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to manage than a new system. For the initiator has the enmity of all who would profit by the preservation of the old institution, and merely lukewarm defenders in those who would gain by the new ones. As I've said before, there's no point in getting involved in political parties. Shane James isn't here. They're corrupt and still require taxation, which is ultimately obtained through a threat of violence. And in a democracy, they rely on hoodwinking the electorate, buying votes with people's money. So instead, I propose a multifaceted approach to achieve our libertarian society, utilising anti-political and entrepreneurial economic methods. Some of you may say that I am proposing an agorist approach towards achieving a libertarian society, as described by Compkin in the New Libertarian Manifesto. Well, I see some advantages in this strategy. I see some advantages in this strategy. I'm personally closely aligned to Rothbard's vision of anarcho-capitalism, as I'm sure anyone that's talked to me will know. I'm definitely not going as far as to propose any of the currently illegal counter-economics tactics that Schulman introduced to agorism. So, simply because getting into a violent confrontation with the state would not be advantageous to any of us, at least not this stage while it's still so powerful. So, first facet, which is one I've talked about in the past and mentioned in the last talk. First facet is education. So we can and should educate the public about the dangers of the state and how we believe that liberty is the best philosophy for the human race. But how successful is this approach? Bob's not going to like this. In the UK, the IEA has existed since 1955 and the ASI since 1977, yet they haven't brought about any discernibly radical change in the thinking of the electorate. In fact, a recent YouGov poll showed that 60% of respondents wanted rail renationalised, compared to 20% who didn't. So, really interesting survey, it's worth digging down into. Of those who supported renationalisation, only 21% thought the trains would then run on time, and 22% thought customer service would improve.
There'd be no profit. No profit.
So, how has the pro-market argument been lost so badly when less than a quarter of people who want to renationalise trains actually think it would get better? This is shocking. People are happy to buy innovative or expensive products that only the free market can create, yet they want state-owned railways and more NHS. Fellow libertarians, we're losing this debate. We need to educate with facts. We must always take the debate back to empirical evidence of why the market is better than the state. We must destroy their claims with evidence and thereby expose their ideas as empty rhetoric and lies. For example, almost any scare story that Ed Miliband brings to the forefront of debate is quickly dismissed with evidence. We know we have a stronger moral argument. A state based on violence cannot be more moral than a free society built on consent. However, it's not just enough to educate. We need to do more to win the debate. We need to encourage people to think differently about the state. We need to alter their perception of it. People need to start questioning the state's motives and see that its actions are not for a greater good as it claims. To do this, we need to control the language of debate as the statists have done. This way, we can break people's mental adherence to statist language and encourage them to think about how they are controlled by the state. We could start by always referring to a state as requiring violence to enact its will. Point out that if it couldn't rely on violence, then it would fail. I've been using this tactic a lot on Twitter lately, and it's quite useful. We should always talk about taxes as penalties and benefits as subsidies. We should criticise the concept of tax as indentured labour, and especially criticise sin taxes and their impact on the poor. As you know, I wrote a piece on this a while back. Useful example, £12 bottle of spirits, only £2.10 of that goes to the entire value chain. £9.90 goes to exchange. We need to show how sin taxes disproportionately affect the poor and how most taxes fall heaviest on the poor and working class. Most importantly, we need to create disillusionment in the state and its agencies. How do we do that? You only have to look at the news. Funnily enough, I looked in the Evening Standard on the way here, and there's a story about 4 million people have been done for parking offences in London in the last year. 4 million tickets issued. Again, really useful for publicising and making people dislike the state. So how do we do that? You only have to look at the news and find cases that we can talk, blog and tweet about. We should adopt the outrage that statists stir up for our own ends, as the underlying cause of their latest campaign du jour is often state failure, not market failure. So some examples. Power prices. We all know Ed Miliband says, oh, when we come in 2015, we're going to lock power prices for 2 years. So what happens? The power companies put up the prices. So instantly, the guy's not even in power yet, and he's already cost us more money. The cost of living crisis, he's already cost us more money. Rail pricing, affected by state monopoly of the infrastructure and regionally franchised to the highest bidder. Crime, affected by state criminalisation of victimless crimes. I've looked up some stats today. 10,000 out of the 84,000 prisoners that are in prison at the moment are in for drug-related offences. And 20,000 are in for robbery, burglary, theft and handling, which probably some of those are related to stealing to pay for drugs. Youth unemployment, exacerbated by the national minimum wage. Bankers' bonuses, well, who bailed out the banks? The government did. The market would have let them fail. Hedge funds, how they increase value, not destroy. And finally, which is one City AM covered, which was quite a good piece, holiday prices out of school terms. State distortion of the market caused by treating schools as prisons and pupils as prisoners. So I propose that we should always use current affairs as a focal point, enabling us to frame a debate around liberty versus the state. Where possible, we should utilise contemporary news stories to talk about how evil the state is. We can discuss these on social media, in conversation, in blogs, etc. For example, recent UK news stories that are appropriate include, and I'm sure you've all seen this one, Asher King. Taken from the NHS by parents to get the treatment they want for him and are prepared to sell their home to pay for, but were subjected to arrest and imprisonment because they dared to question our national religion of the NHS. Rotherham. Obviously this one's come out recently as well. Police and council ignore or cover up 1,400 cases of child abuse. Internationally, police brutality. Obviously, if any of you follow me on Twitter, you know I've been quite worked up about the murder of Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Apply to Gaza. People of Gaza, innocent people being killed in a dispute between two bloodthirsty states. And obviously state surveillance, Snowden's disclosures about various state agencies around the world. But again, you can bring up other stories. There's lots of historical stuff that you can mention. Hillsborough, police covering up their lies and incompetence. Bloody Sunday, British Army gunning down peaceful protesters. Ian Tomlinson, unlawfully killed by Met Police. Jean-Charles de Menendez, innocent electrician executed with 7 shots to the head after police had held him down and first evacuated a crowded tube train. And I don't know if you know, that policy, that shoot-to-kill policy, is still enacted by the Met Police today. They haven't changed that. that could happen to anyone. All the above cases can be utilised to demonstrate the power of the state. In fact, it's only there to protect itself and its agents. Finally, dismiss democracy wherever possible, don't engage with it. I know a lot of people disagree with me on that. Tell people you don't vote and they'll always respond with, then you have no say. This is easily countered, firstly, by pointing out that a bad decision made by millions is no more morally right than a bad decision made by 1 or 1,000. Also, you can point out that they're validating the government, even if they voted the other way, they're validating the whole process. So they can't complain about the government they get for the next 5 years. So that's the first facet of my approach. The second facet is actually taking action. Talking alone won't change anything. Don't worry, I'm not about to inspire a revolution here. While it's very enjoyable, there's no point us sitting here month after month talking about the differences between agorism, voluntarism, anarcho-capitalism, Georgism, objectivism, etc. if nothing comes out of it.
What's etc.?
Sorry?
What's etc.?
Well, yeah, I've run out of isms of it. We need to act if we want this new society. Nobody else will do it for us. Marx and Engels may have sat in a room and wrote their philosophy without personally doing anything about enacting it, but the people who did could see the power they could grab. With libertarianism, there's no power structure, so no incentive for power-hungry politicians. We want to liberate people, so to provide them with alternate market solutions, we rely on entrepreneurs. They will be our agents of change, and in fact they already are, but I'll come on to that shortly. So how do we build a strategy to undermine the state? The answer is through acts of resistance and even civil disobedience. So for instance, police for police, and this is something I didn't realise there's quite so much of on the internet, especially on Twitter and Facebook. There are many accounts, and even YouTube, many accounts of people filming the police doing their thing, usually beating people or shooting people or whatever. This is becoming quite a thing. In fact, if you read some of the I'm trying to think, it's called Cop Block. If you follow Cop Block on Facebook, it's getting dangerously close to people starting a revolution over there. They are really getting fed up with the police driving around in military equipment supplied by the Pentagon to gun them down with no comeback whatsoever. Attend council meetings, film them and blog about them. As you're probably aware, there was a case, I think it was last year or the year before, somebody ended up in prison, or being arrested anyway, over filming council meetings. Expose corruption and incompetence of any public officials you encounter. If you read Private Eye, that's a good source for any of those sort of stories. Freedom of information requests. They're remarkably easy, but often resisted by the challenged organisation. I'm sure Gaz can tell you more about this. Object to legislation in writing at the Green Paper consultation stage. Use encryption technologies for communication. Support human rights organisations in their fight against state oppression of the individual. Sit in on public inquiries and blog and tweet about them. I attended the Hutton inquiry the day that Alistair Campbell gave evidence. That was quite interesting. Write letters to newspapers. Lobbying doesn't provide us wide an audience. Withdraw from paying the TV licence, and I know there's lots of people who like that one. Protest on the streets or via petitions. And finally, tax resistance, although that one is potentially costly enough that you can end up in prison. Though these actions will help us undermine public confidence in the state and win the moral argument, people will still primarily care about the things that affect them. Healthcare, benefits, etc. So that brings me on to a third facet. Let's build the society if we want, and let's do it ourselves. So rather than try to change the state, let's make it obsolete. We need to identify private solutions and publicise them. There are many existing services that replace the state systems that we complain about, and those services that don't exist, we need to create. So let's look at a few examples. Healthcare. One of the most common complaints about the NHS is getting to see a GP, especially in crowded urban areas. As the price of consulting a GP is currently zero and supply is limited, there is always over demand. This causes service rationing, demonstrated best by waiting lists. However, there are alternatives. Technology is making remote care possible over video conferencing services. For example, I found these just looking on Google. For example, the US firm MeMD offers an instant consultation for $49.95. There are many primary health care providers in the UK offering private consultation for as little as £70 for 15 minutes. Most interesting, however, is a new subscription method of direct care that's emerging in the US called concierge medicine, also called retainer medicine or direct care.
That's what I'm calling it.
Simon knows more about this topic than me, having written several articles on it, but a quick Google search and I found My Healthcare Clinic, based in South London. £25 per month subscription provides you unlimited 20-minute appointments and an annual health examination. The great thing about this service rationing is that charging for GP appointments is back on the political agenda. This will instantly make all the above services comparatively less expensive, thereby encouraging more people to go outside the NHS. And also there's a large market here in UK residents travelling to have surgery in cheaper countries, such as those of the former Eastern Bloc. So, moving on to welfare. Most insurers offer better schemes for serious illness and death than the state schemes, and we should be encouraging more people to use those. Friendly societies still exist, and as mutual societies provide all their profits back to members. And interestingly, many trade unions offer benevolent funds for hardship cases, as well as many other excellent member services. Some examples from Unite include free legal and financial advice, credit union facilities for the financially disenfranchised, and a tax refund service. Unions suggesting members utilise legal tax avoidance, surely not. Pensions. There is one challenge in withering the state. How do we unwind the Ponzi scheme that is national insurance and pensions within the welfare state? This will concern many who wrongly believe they have paid into some fictional pension scheme. This isn't easy, but it's an important answer if we are to progress. I don't have an answer to this, incidentally. This is the difficult one. However, interestingly, the coalition government has implemented legislation that requires all but the smallest employers to force all of their staff into contributory pension schemes, private pension schemes, albeit with low contributions initially. However, this could be seen as a first small step towards removing state pensions for all but the poorest. So how about education? While private education is still prohibitive, except for children of MPs and prospective MPs and MPs, there's an alternative that many parents have utilised: home education. This has become increasingly popular in general, but particularly with Libertarians. Also, with the advent of the internet, there are now many primary, secondary and even tertiary education courses available for free online. There's even a Facebook support group called the Libertarian Homeschooler. Transport. So, who will build the roads? Entrepreneurs will. You may have read about the private road in Kelson near Bath. The local council closed a road, causing a 14-mile diversion. This increased fuel bills and travel time for thousands of commuters. An entrepreneur, a guy called Mike Watts, has built a private road and charges £2 per journey. Also on transport, avoiding state licensing and monopolies of taxis has been recognised as beneficial to customers, and Uber was founded with this in mind. Has anyone here used Uber yet? I've heard nothing but good reports about it.
It's brilliant.
Very good.
Excellent.
It's banned in Germany now.
Also, however, some states are fighting back. It's recently been banned in Germany.
Did you hear what Uber said? He said, you cannot put a brake on progress, we will continue to supply our services.
He's about to say that.
It's amazing, they have, you know, first time a company has balls, they just don't follow legislation and regulation blindly, they fight back.
Well, there are other companies that have done that, but most of them end up in trouble eventually. So, currencies. States that issue their own currency can constantly devalue it. This is a hidden tax, but most don't recognise as such, and you never get to vote for or against. As many of you know, there's been an explosion of private or cryptocurrencies in recent years as stable technological solutions become available. Bitcoin is one example of these. Who here owns Bitcoin?
1.5. Or 1.4.
Interestingly, this depends on your definition of interestingly, I was recently reading the European Central Bank's October 2012 document entitled Virtual Currency Schemes, and was pleased to see the invention of Bitcoin credited to the concepts of the Austrian school. There was even a sidebar mentioning Mises and Hayek, a footnote mentioning Rothbard, and reference to Hayek's 1976 publication, Denationalisation of Money. This is the European Central Bank.
Yes.
HMRC has even recognised Bitcoin this year, albeit primarily to tax transactions. So those are just some easy areas. How about the really difficult areas where the various strands of libertarianism frequently disagree, such as private policing and private courts? So looking at justice, there are already many private alternatives to courts, such as arbitration and mediation. For example, family law solicitors advise that you should first attempt private mediation to negotiate financial divorce settlements rather than go to court, as it's faster and cheaper. I plan to test this myself soon, I'll keep you updated. In employment matters, there are many arbitration services, including ACAS, that an employee, employer, customer or supplier can utilise. In fact, the London Court of International Arbitration is one of the world's leading international institutions for commercial dispute resolution, and currently hears 300 commercial cases a year. So moving on to the difficult one, policing. This is always a difficult area, as many imagine policing to just be limited to the uniformed thugs you occasionally see after a crime has been committed.
No comment.
But surely preventing a crime is better than solving it afterwards. The first of the 9 principles of good policing, often credited with being written by Sir Robert Peel in 1829, is crime prevention. Police judge their success by the number of arrests they make, whereas the public judge their success by the absence of crime. This is a fundamental difference. So how do you deter crime? My business office is fitted with an alarm that is connected to a manned security centre 24/7. It costs £230 plus VAT per year. To be issued by the police with a unique reference number for our alarm service costs £40 plus VAT, just to give us a number to report on. Did you know that there are 330,000 private security staff in the UK compared to only 132,000 police officers? Increasingly in recent years, residents are clubbing together and procuring private security guards to patrol their streets. I found, and this was this afternoon, I found a company called First Class Protection, which has many contracts for protecting residential streets in London. In one publicised example, 70 residents around 5 streets in St John's Wood, obviously they can afford it, have clubbed together and paid £1,000 per annum each for a patrol service. Crime's almost disappeared. So in summary, as you can see, there are many private alternatives to state services. We need to encourage use of these services as they contrast well against the state's poor services. Its inability to provide the assistance that it uses to justify its existence will make more people discontent with having taxes extracted from them. And where private alternatives don't already exist, why don't you invent them? Are there any gaps in the market that you can think of that can undermine the state? If so, then why don't you create a service to fill those gaps? So why aren't you helping? How can you help personally? Most importantly, be an entrepreneur. They are the ones that can create a society based on libertarian ideals. We need to out-deliver, out-manoeuvre and out-compete the state. Only private business can do this. If you don't feel you can affect this societal change personally, then at least investigate and use alternatives to state services. If you find these services are good, then publicise them widely. It all undermines the perception of the state as mankind's saviour and provider. So to conclude, my proposed strategy is threefold. Firstly, educate people as to how consensual market solutions are better and that the state can only distort the market. Secondly, undermine the public's confidence in the state by exposing its corruption, violence and other failures. Lastly, show them examples of how the market can and does provide better solutions than the state. In his book Civil Disobedience, Henry David Thoreau said, "I heartily accept the motto, that government is best which governs least, and I should like to see it acted up to more rapidly and systematically. Carried out, it finally amounts to this, which I also believe, but government is best which governs not at all. And when men are prepared for it, that will be the kind of government which they will have." Government is at best but an expedient, but most governments are usually, and all governments are sometimes, inexpedient. So are we libertarians really prepared for that kind of government? The one that governs least? This year is the 70th anniversary of the publication of Hayek's Road to Serfdom. Instead of travelling along that road to serfdom, we should start building the road to liberty. Our liberty. Who will build that road? We will.